Hello, everybody, to this week's developer session. This week we have mainly two, maybe three topics we want to talk about. One is some ideas for automated altcoin tradings, and I would like to discuss a little bit with the developers who are joining if somebody would be available to work on this. So first it would require a proof of concept and a spec, and then to get into the development. A second part I would like to, which is not pointed out on the agenda, but yeah, we're getting close to the DAO launch, and I would like to just talk a little bit about some strategies regarding the DAO launch, and also from the technical point of view and from the roadmap side. And the third part, if we still have time, I would like to give a little bit of background about the stuff that I'm working at the moment for the DAO, for proving basically the consistency of the network consensus so that every node has really exactly the same state of the DAO locally with other nodes. And it's based on a very basic idea of Bitcoin, a hash chain. So at every block, we are creating a hash from the current state of the DAO and then connecting it with using the previous hash in the new hash. So we are creating a chain of hashes, and when the latest hash is the same with somebody else, you can be sure the history was the same as well. But yeah, let's jump into the first topic. If you guys have anything you would like to bring into the agenda, we are very flexible. We don't have anything pressing this week. Do you have anything what you would like to discuss? If not, then I jump right into this topic regarding altcoin trading, automated altcoin trading. With fiat, of course, we cannot really do this because banks are usually not offering APIs, and if one or two payment providers are delivering modern IT, 21st century IT, then most of the other banks will not do it. So it would be a terrible effort to try to support it for all the banks. And I mean, maybe at some point in 5 or 10 or 20 years, the banks will deliver a standard for APIs so that the application could basically request from the bank API if the payment was done and if the payment has been received, and then this manual clicking the button that you have sent the fiat or that you have received the fiat could be done by software. But yeah, we are not there, and banks will maybe never arrive there, so we don't count on this. But on the altcoin side, luckily, we are a little bit more modern, and we could basically integrate the lookup. As for normal altcoins, you can verify the transaction on the block explorer. It has a little bit of security concerns, of course, because could be theoretically with some small altcoin that somebody runs a block explorer and manipulates it and then scams traders. But I think it's a very limited concern, and especially with the highly traded altcoins, probably no block explorer provider will do this risk. But of course, there's some limitation. You cannot trade millions or billions with this concept. But I think for our use case, it's good enough. So, and we could leave it to the user which block explorer you want to use for delivering the proof data. We could even integrate our own block explorer and so on. So I think that's a Solfever problem, and it can be also optional. So basically, the user can define if you want to take this little bit extra risk and get much more convenience on the other side. So the basic idea is with a normal altcoin, you don't need to click the button. The software can call API from Block Explorer and can get the data once the altcoin transaction is confirmed. Of course, depending on the altcoin, there will be a requirement for different depth of confirmation blocks. Some altcoins, especially those which have very short confirmation times, are not considered safe after 1 or 2 confirmations. Maybe you need to wait for 10 or 20 confirmations. And on the receiver side, also on the altcoin receiver side, the application can also check if the transaction was made to one's address, and then confirm the payment receipt, so the user don't need to click the button and the application will do the payout automatically. It has mainly one conceptual problem. It can be that a trader receives on his Altcoin address exactly the same amount from 2 different trades, and then the software doesn't know which trade was completed. So that's a little bit a problem, but I think we can work with this. So the application basically could check when you have this case that you have 2 trades open where you expect payments with the same amount, then you need the manual confirmation. But then we have the same problem also manually. The user will not know who has paid him when that would be the case. So we never had, as far as I'm aware, there was never a problem with this. In reality, especially most amounts with altcoins are not even amounts, and just with this you have kind of like a fingerprint of the transaction. Some altcoins have maybe support extra metadata where, like payment IDs, where you could add the trade ID as an extra metadata to the transaction, but that's not supported on all altcoins, so that will not work as well. But I would not consider this as a showstopper, but something what we have to keep in mind how to deal with this. And our main altcoin, Monero, as by far the most traded altcoin on Bisq. We cannot do this because Monero is a privacy coin, and the lookup in the block explorer doesn't give you any information basically about if you have received the transaction or not. But luckily, all those privacy coins, and especially Monero, they have a system where the sender of the Monero transaction with the transaction key and the receiving address and the transaction ID, with these 3 pieces of data, you can either use it in the Monero wallet to verify the sending, or you can go to a web page which is offering the services, and by this you can prove that the Monero has been sent. The receiver cannot deliver any proof that he has not received or has received it. So it's, with this coin, it's always in the responsibility of the altcoin of the Monero sender to provide the proof. And when he cannot provide the proof, and there is a real dispute, I'm not aware that there have been such a case, but then basically the Monero receiver would be considered as the winner, because it's the duty of the sender to provide the proof, and when he's not able to provide the proof, then the arbitrator cannot find out basically when both are stating a different view on the transaction, and in doubt he will believe the Monero receiver, because it was clearly stated that the sender need to provide the proof. And sorry, also especially with Monero, we would like to add better integration or more integration for Monero traders, because it's our main traded currency. So there are a few ideas around this. So there's the basic idea to automate the altcoin trading, and then there are a few additional ideas how to integrate Monero into Bisq. A basic idea is to have a API with, I think I have some noise on Thomas' side. Thomas, can I mute you? Do you mute yourself? Yeah, thanks. To integrate basically API with a local Monero wallet. So when a Monero trader has running his local Monero D, then the API could connect to this, and you could make the Monero payment or confirm the Monero receipt directly from Bisq. You don't need to switch over to Monero. I'm not 100% sure if it's really a much required or requested feature. We didn't get too much feedback. There is a proposal, I think, out, or at least the idea was communicated a while, and we have not found a Monero developer who were interested to work on this. I mean, to use Monero as a base currency, that's highly, so there's much demand for this, but that's a big effort, and basically it's not on our roadmap for the next half year or so to get into this. That's a big effort for minimum half a year development time, and it got also confirmed from Monero developers that also on the Monero side it's quite a big and complex enterprise. So there are no plans, no concrete plans on this. So the easiest thing, to get the Monero wallet somehow integrated. There is a Java implementation for API for Monero. So it shouldn't be really too hard. I assume an experienced developer who knows the Monero side well and also Java well could do it maybe in 1 month or something like this. It's just a question how much it really adds for a trader, because he has already his Monero wallet. He needs to have his Monero wallet running, and yeah, then it doesn't really matter so much if you switch the application and do it there. And of course, it would add also security risk when there's some bugs and so on. And so yeah, I'm not super convinced that this is a really important feature, but it's on the table as well. And maybe a little bit more interesting and important feature would be to integrate this this proof for the transaction sending. Have not thought about details how to do it, and about the complexity and context. We basically in Bisq, we don't want to introduce dependencies on other services, especially not direct HTTP calls. Everything goes over Tor. Many of those APIs have Cloudflare, so then you cannot, you need to resolve a capture and so on. So you cannot use the API over Tor. And our solution, like we do with the price feeds, is to use our own nodes where you connect as a hidden service to these servers. And those are getting their data from services. And we could use something similar, basically this Tor proxy on our side, where you send a request for a transaction proof with these 3 different pieces of data. And so the Monero sender could transfer this data to the receiver, to the Monero receiver, and the application of the Monero receiver can make then a request for the transaction proof. And when this returns as successful, then it means that it's basically proven that the sender has sent the Monero, and then the receiver of the Monero could confirm the receipt and finalize the trade. So it can be automated. So that might be a quite interesting feature, and we should look into to write a proposal for this and think about all the details and what's needed and the security risks and so on, and how we deal with this. I think all these features where we are changing the security context need to be communicated to the user, and should be basically optional, that the user make the decision if he's basically willing to add extra trust, that he's trusting on the one side these Bisq developers who are running this proxy node, and on the other side these services which are delivering these proofs. I'm aware of at least 2 web pages which deliver this serving for a transaction proof. So we could basically use both, and then limiting and reducing the risk exposure on this side. But of course, it's not the same like when you're really verifying with your local wallet. So yeah, that's basic. Yeah, and the goal is basically that the user, that we can speed up the altcoin trading, the Monero trading, especially for pro traders. It's very crucial that they get release the Bitcoin as soon as possible and not get locked up too long. And with volatility, they're more exposed to volatility risk, and their resources are blocked the time when it's locked in the payment. One thing to consider is the amount of, also the number of confirmations a user want to wait until for what you consider that it's safe. I think it's not really a practical issue. At least I'm not aware of double spend attacks, at least not on the big altcoins like Monero. And with Monero, it takes quite a time anyway until you get the confirmation. I think usually 20 minutes or something like this. So because of the way how the ring signatures are created and so on, at least on the Monero side, I don't see it as a big issue. And basically, I think it would make sense to, when we work on this, to basically really focus on the Monero use case, because that's our by far most traded altcoin. When you check the statistics, I mean, in overall, they have more or less 90% of the trade volume on Bisq, and from all the altcoins, they have another probably more than 90%. All the altcoins are tiny in relation to this, so we should take this in consideration where we put our efforts on the development side. So after this broad overview about these basic ideas which are floating around this topic, I would like to ask especially Thomas or maybe also Ben, both are developers who are not very deep in a domain already, like Bernard with the API or Oscar with Bitcoin or Florian with the peer-to-peer network. So I would like to ask you if you would be basically interested to first to work on a proposal, or on a specification, basically to think about all the details and get a good plan how to implement it, what need to be done, which challenges are on the usability side, on the conceptual side, and so on. And then make a roadmap how to develop it. Basically, like always, we try to develop it with a minimum viable product. So do the absolute minimum what's required, which makes sense from the user perspective as a feature, and then extend. It doesn't have to be done all as a big feature. Shouldn't be done in this way. Should be in small iterations. Would you both be interested to focus on this and work on that, or any of you?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting, and I would be interested. Yes.
Great. I mean, maybe I wanted to have with you both anyway a more in-depth chat about your availability and background and so on. I'm super happy with your contribution so far and would like to get you deeper into development. So maybe after the call we can continue. So, but yeah, I mean with Ben. Actually, when you are interested in this, I think it's such a big project that it really requires 2 developers, and it's usually more efficient when 1 developer is working on something. And with Ben has done quite a few very valuable contributions on the DAO side, and I was very positively impressed how quickly he got into the code, because quite also on the UI side, the domains are, the domain code is quite complex, and seems that he found very quickly his way into it. So and there is still a lot, I could use a lot of help still, especially on the UI side and also other areas. So I would maybe, when Thomas wants to take this project, basically, I would prefer if Ben is okay, maybe to stay more on the DAO area. But as said, we can discuss later a little bit about your background and whatever, how we go on with this. Is this okay for you, Ben, or would you also be super interested on working on this automated altcoin trading project?
So I don't know. I think like the DAO is also very good for me, so I think I can stay with that if that helps.
Perfect. Goody. Does anybody want to add something, or has any ideas or any concerns, whatever, to this topic?
So from what I understand is that for each altcoin, we will have to write something like a plugin that would connect to some external, I don't know, something, blockchain or website to verify, right? And for every altcoin, we would have to determine different way to verify those transactions, right?
Yeah, for the standard altcoins, it's basically a lookup to a block explorer, and as said, it has to be done over can be maybe integrated in the price node. Also, same way like we're doing it with the price node, that it goes over Tor. And for Monero, I think we need this transaction proof APIs and services. And long term, when it's successful and it really makes sense, it would make sense to extend it to all these altcoins which are traded on Bisq. We will not, for adding a new altcoin where we have no idea if it will be traded at all, and still 80 or 90% of the newly added never get traded, and we kick it out after 3 months again. After 3 months again. So we will not add additional effort like implementing that this API and so on. And especially with smaller altcoins, there's much more security risks. Nobody knows who is running then this Explorer and if they are trusted or not. So the clear goal is to start with those who have real impact for Bisq, which is Monero at the moment. When it works there and everything is good there, we can go to the next most traded coin, maybe Litecoin, maybe Dash, maybe Ethereum. I don't know really the numbers, but I think some of those are more traded like other. Decred was quite much traded, or a Seer coin in the past, but I think recently they have left. So yeah, I think I would prioritize it on the trade volume when we see altcoin, which is for a longer time traded much, not just for a spike because they're new and don't have another exchange, and then when they get listed somewhere else, then they are leaving again, like Bitcoin, Rhodium. So when it was really traded for a long time, like half a year on a good basis, then we can consider to add the effort to add this support. So it will be always an optional feature, just enabled for those where we've implemented it. And even then, I think the user should make the decision to make basically when he creates the offer to enable that the offer can be like we have now with this instant trade, to have basically it's a kind of like a automated offer which supports automated trade, and the taker need to know it when he takes such an offer, then he agrees basically to this. But all these details should be worked out in the proposal, and I have not thought deep about all the context around it.
Yeah, and shouldn't we verify the blockchain instead of explorers?
Yeah, that would be even better when we run basically our own Explorer in a way. It can be done, especially for Monero. Maybe it's really worth it. But of course, it adds more and more effort and more costs. And yeah, but of course, that would be more secure, like just trusting another service. I think, and the same, but I think there are higher priorities like another long-term or proposal what we want to implement someday, which is already out long-term, is to create our own price providers. Basically, that we are, especially on the fiat side, we are very dependent on Bitcoin average. There have been 1 or 2 times technical problems on their side, and then all the percentage-based offers cannot be taken when there is no price provider. To have basically our own simple price provider, which is a mix of different others, and when one is failing, we are not offline. That has higher priority, in my opinion, like going in that road, in that direction. But that's actually some other topic, Thomas, which you maybe could have a look. I don't want to mix it now. It's big enough, this project, but this, to have our own price provider service for Bisq, we are basically getting the price feeds from different platforms like Bitcoin Average, but also from other big exchanges, and then creating our own price, which get delivered to our users, would be more resilient, like our current situation. It's not a big priority because usually, luckily, we nearly never have problems with this, but it's something what we should improve in future, and maybe you can keep it in the back of your head. But I think the altcoin trading, automating altcoin trading, I think has higher priority, because unfortunately over the last 2-3 months we are losing quite a little bit of volume on the Monero side mainly. Also on fiat we are growing slowly organically, but Monero goes up and down very a lot. But over the monthly volume we are losing, so we have to take care to keep the Monero traders and deliver them a good trade experience and good service. Goodie. Then anything else, or should we jump to the next topic?
I'm fine, so.
Goodie. Then just a little bit, a quick overview about our roadmap with the DAO launch. So from the testing, everything looks good. So there was no bugs and no problems discovered. Small bugs on the UI side, but nothing critical. And over the last days, I started to work on this idea which I had since long time, to add a chain of hashes. So at every block, we are creating a hash of the whole DAO state. I mean, I have to give a little bit of a little bit more information to understand it. Well, also the DAO state consists on the one side on data which is based on the blockchain data, like transactions, and on the other side on peer-to-peer network data, like the proposal data, which we are publishing in the peer-to-peer network, or the blind vote data. And we are using the blockchain basically to make sure that the peer-to-peer network data is consistent over the network. I don't want to get into details about this. It's another big complex topic. To get to a consensus in the DAO, as in the vote result phase, basically, where every user, getting all the data, this mix of peer-to-peer network data, which is by default not guaranteed to be consistent. Can be that you never received one of those peer-to-peer network payloads, and that's a valid case. It's not guaranteed that the delivery. But at the result phase, because we have additional features which makes it clear that there is consistency in the network, it has to be that every node received to the exactly same result. And this result is basically stored in a model class which is called DAO state, and that carries basically the state of the DAO. Of that one part is just the blocks, so the Bisq blocks. It's basically a filtered version of the Bitcoin blockchain. But then there is a lot of additional data, like, for instance, when a bond got confiscated, this data gets stored there, and the UTXO said that this block height. And because all this data get verified after a new block arrives, and when everything is processed, so the block get passed and all the verification is done, and when you enter a new phase, like for instance getting into the vote result phase, then Bisq get issued when there was a compensation request and such stuff. All that changes the state of the DAO of the Bisq. And that's basically represented in this DAO state class. And I created, now we create a hash of the full DAO state after a block has arrived and processed fully. After this time, we're creating a hash. And at the next block, we create the new hash of the new state, because of course it has for sure changed, because there are new blocks added from the Bitcoin side, and maybe there have been issued some Bisq or some trading fees, and some Bisq got burned and so on. And to reflect all the history, we are using the previous hash and adding it for creating the new hash. So we have this chain of hashes, similar like in Bitcoin. With that, you have the feature that at any time, when you have the same hash like another node, then you know all the history is the same as well, because when there would be any change in the history, it would have led to a different hash. And implemented in the UI a new page basically, where you receive the hashes. That also by default we are requesting the last 10 hashes from the most recent blocks from the seed nodes. So you are connecting anyway to minimum 2 or 3 seed nodes at startup, and we're using this also to request the hashes from the seed nodes. So you will see already if you are in sync with those 2 or 3 seed nodes, which gives you already a high confidence. When you're in sync, then it's a high chance that everything is okay. And with every new block, every peer is publishing in the network his hash, and you receive it from your connected peers. So you get a quite big number quickly of hashes with every new block. So when there would be a consensus issue at the next block, you would likely see it, and then you would see the peers which deliver a different hash, and then you can select those, and you see always the previous hash. You can go back and basically find out at which block the different happens. you can request from such a peer which is out of sync with you. You can request then all the hashes from back to the Genesis transaction. With that, you get then really exactly the point where a different happened. And I tested yesterday, and there was some inconsistency in our current DAO testnet, but nothing critical. It was just the sorting of some lists was not deterministic, was basically missing sorting, and that created differences. And I've seen it then when I requested at a certain block time, it changed. It was actually the vote result when we get edit some data. There was some non-deterministic sorting behavior because we used hash sets, and I added then the sorting for the data what we're storing, and then it became consistent. And so the good news is that it seems so far, I'm still not finished with this project, but at least this one part is quite finished now. Also on the DAO state side, we are consistent. It seems that we are consistent. I've only tested it with 2 development nodes, not with the real nodes, and the other nodes are not supporting this feature, so we need a new release until a few testers have updated and so on. And I want to be more sure before releasing it and before asking other developers to use it. But with that, we will very soon see then if when you run the node, if you're really 100% in sync with all the other nodes, and when one node is not in sync, you can contact the developers and find out. The first thing what you should do is to rebuild your DAO state. That might happen actually when we are releasing it, then probably everybody is out of sync because of this sorting issues and so on, and because you are storing your past DAO state and reapplying it, so you're only creating the new stuff from the last blocks for performance reasons. So I expect that basically everybody will be out of sync with everybody because of this sorting issue, and everybody basically have to rebuild the DAO state from Genesis. That take a little bit of performance, but 1 or 2 minutes of frozen UI, and then you should be there as well. And I think with that we get a very strong monitoring about any consensus issues. So when there would be any issue, we get alerted very quickly and can try to fix it. I will try also to build in some auto recovery. So when you're out in sync, that to rebuild the DAO state is a little bit costly, especially when after a few months or so, when the data get much bigger. So I'm not so sure how to deal exactly with it. But it's still work in progress, but at least it's already quite far. And the second piece, which is missing at the moment, is to monitor the peer-to-peer network data. That's basically only the proposal data after the proposal phase. Before, they are basically non-really consensus critical data because you can remove a proposal anyway. So they are temporary data, but then after the proposal phase, in the voting phase, you cannot change your proposals anymore. And basically every user should have the same set of proposals. And there is already some features where, when you're missing proposals, you're requesting it from the network and so, but it's still not really 100% complete. And the second data is then the blind vote data. And as well, after the blind vote phase, everybody should have the same set of peer-to-peer network data. During the blind vote phase, it doesn't really make much sense because at any time somebody can make their blind vote and then distribute in the network, and some users receive it earlier like others. So in this time, it wouldn't make sense to check for consistency. But after this time, especially after a break, as we always have a break of a few blocks between those critical events, and that's mainly for dealing with reorganizations, because a reorg could change theoretically that the transaction is not included anymore and then a vote or anymore. And to avoid all these problems, we are waiting a few blocks. So we will use basically the same concept, being sure to be on the same page when creating the vote result. we're using here for the monitoring. So we do the monitoring only after the break, so we avoid any issues with reworks, and we have enough time that the data get well distributed in the network. And yeah, the basic idea is to collect all this data, to create also some hashes, and when you are not in sync, to try to recover automatically to request the missing data from the other peers. But I have not started on that area at the moment. That's at the moment on my table, and will take another few days probably to get it complete. But hopefully next week or so, all this area should be complete and should give us a very strong confidence for the DAO state, both on this hard consensus part, which is this blockchain-based data, and the secondary part from the peer-to-peer network data, where basically it can be a valid state that some peers have some data and others don't have it. Could be a malicious peer who has created and stored locally some a proposal, but has manipulated the software to never send it out, so nobody else can have it, but he locally will have it, and then he will arrive at a different data set. And how to deal with this to not cause false positives, basically, that then everybody in the network would get a consensus alert because this one peer reported a different hash. That's one of the challenges. Yeah, how to deal exactly with this, but I think it's all solvable. And another part is to get this all included in the monitoring. Unfortunately, Florian is not here. I don't know. I have not heard back from him. Maybe he's sick or something. But yeah, I need to work on the concept which monitoring data makes sense to include in the monitoring, so that we have on the monitoring side very good overview how the state of the DAO and the peer-to-peer network data of the DAO are distributed, and yeah, how the state is. But I want to have it directly in the application as well, especially to alert the user when there would be a consensus issues, that a big part of the network is has a different view on the data, that either get resolved automatically with the next block, because it can be a valid situation in a rework case. So when there's a rework, basically you have a different consensus like somebody else, because your block might contain different transactions. Also, I think the other block hash, yeah, we are storing also the block hash, so will be for sure then out of sync. So it shouldn't be a terrible red flag alert. The red flag alert would only come after a few blocks when you're still, and depending how many peers are reporting it, because when there's one peer who has maybe whatever, some software issue or whatever, or has not updated, like now in the testing, when he has not rebuilt his DAO state, he will automatically report a different hash, and we don't want to make the user nervous because of this. So we need to figure out the way how we deal all with this, either take some priority nodes like the seed nodes, where we say, okay, when you're in sync with the seed node, everything is fine. When there are some other nodes which report a different hash, then it's a problem. It's their problem, not your problem, likely, but that's still a little bit not 100% defined how I implement this, and yeah, what's the best way how to deal with this. Another small thing is Christoph started to work on a new view in the UI for the DAO, where we want to represent the economic aspect of the DAO in a better way. At the moment, we have it a little bit in the dashboard in the wallet, that you can see the price of the last trades, and derived from this, and with the amount of Bisq in circulation, you can derive a market capitalization. But it would be good to have basically a chart over time of the burn rate. So how much Bisq have been created and how much have been burned over time, and a price chart over time, how the price has developed over time, and the market capitalization over time. So such data would be good to have in the application itself as well. I mean, there will be additional on the web page also some data about this, basically facts and figures about the economic aspects of the DAO. And beside this, we want to have also then the network statistics about the DAO, like also we have in this page in the wallet, but in the wallet it's not really the right place. It's not about your wallet, it's about the network. And in that area, probably we will add then this consensus part as well. At the moment, I have it in the governance tab, but it's probably better to move it into this new tab and page there. And for the network, yeah, there should be all the statistics, how many transactions are there, how many burn transactions, all kind of, how many UTXOs and so on, all kind of interesting statistic data about the DAO should be present there. And that's something, Ben, if you are interested to help me there, that would be a great help, because I need to focus on the core stuff like the security stuff that we are really 100% sure to be on consensus, and so, and all UI related stuff has lower priority for myself, but for the user, of course, it would be a great benefit. And if you can help me to get this implemented there, it would be great. Beside this, yeah, with the plans, so when everything goes good, I assume in 1 week I'm done with this monitoring and and this hash stuff. Then something which I start probably very soon is to start a mainnet testing Genesis, as a Genesis distribution on mainnet, but just for testing, nothing real, and just with a few developers for testing. It becomes expensive because you need to pay real transaction fees, and the Bitcoin what I use for spending it, and so I want to get back because that's real Bitcoin then. And I'm not sure if I use really 2.5 Bitcoin or a small amount and change in the code that it's not required. But yeah, anyway, so it will be only with a few developers who really actively testing it, but it will help us to test more realistically with real transactions on the mainnet with big blocks, and especially from performance side. I think that's one area what we might need a little bit more effort before we launch to avoid any performance issues. It's much more realistic on mainnet, and I would like to start this as soon as possible, because then we have more time to get more blocks to really get more realistic scenarios from the performance side, and that could delay a little. I mean, basically, beside this, I thought we are ready to launch maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. But if it turns out that there are a few performance issues what we have to work on and improve, and then test again, because every change in that area could theoretically break something, it might delay a little bit the launch date. Maybe it's more realistic mid of April, but at least we're getting close, and there are no big showstoppers visible at the moment. And a general strategy for the release is that we don't want to add any additional risk to the project. So any bigger changes which could add risk for Bisq itself will be delayed after the launch, or 1 or 2 months after the launch, to not get any problem into that event, basically. And I'm not very sure with the API if we should. I have the feeling we are getting now ready with the API. It was basically planned maybe for the next release or for the second next release to launch the API as well. And the API for sure is a risky enterprise, because we will not have time to test everything perfectly, and it could be that something happened, that in the worst case people are losing money, and it would fall back negative in the worst case when there is a big issue, in the worst case a security issue, and some people manage to hack something and steal money or whatever. It could create very negative headlines for Bisq, and I want to avoid any such risk around the DAO, because it would fall back on the DAO when we are launching at the same time, and then a week later some users get hacked and money gets stolen because of a security vulnerability from the API side. Of course, it can happen in Bisq as well, but Bisq is battle tested already since more than 2 years, so the risk is much lower, like with any new feature what we are launching. And also that's the reason that I'm a little bit considering to postpone the API launch after we are after the DAO is really out and we're good with the DAO, and then we would have also more time for testing it better and maybe have more soft launch that we know some users are using the current API already to transition then to the new to the production ready API and get some early real life testers basically and reduce the risk basically. And maybe I'm a little bit over cautious, but better to be cautious like sorry afterwards. And what do you think, Bernard, from your side? Do you think that makes sense, or do you think that's a little bit too much of over cautiousness? Bernard, the audio is very bad on your side. Hello? Yeah, but it's very, very bad. Maybe the microphone is on a bad position or so. Maybe you can try to fix your microphone. It seems that it's somewhere it sounds like you have it in the pocket or so. Otherwise, we can discuss it later or by chat as well. It doesn't have to be decided yet. I just wanted to bring this out that around the DAO launch or already now, because we are getting close there, we shouldn't have any bigger risky new releases or features. There might be one exception on the peer-to-peer network side, because we have some issues probably a little bit in the peer-to-peer network that it's under too heavy load and messages don't arrive. And Florian is working on this, and it's probably such a high priority that and it's highly risky. So that's a little bit of a dangerous thing, but it seems that we have to fix this, and it would be also very bad for the DAO when on the same time, or when we get more users, maybe with the DAO launch can attract also many more new users, that we get even more problems than on the peer-to-peer network side, and especially because of the DAO is using and depending a lot on the peer-to-peer network and also adding load on the peer-to-peer network. Not much, I think, but it will add something. So that's maybe the one exception where we have to, but that's already probably for the next release. So we will have a little bit more time for testing it also then live and see how it behaves, the changes. But beside this, I try to avoid anything which is risky. And Bernard,
can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm fine with this. It's good to have this thing tested really well. So if we could have like completely separate release just for the API and to have people focus on testing that part, that would be great.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. And I think also from the feature set, probably when we have more time, the features are a little bit larger and it makes more sense for the users to use it then. So maybe let's try to target maybe 1 or 2 months after the DAO, depending how well the DAO launch goes. When there are no problems at all, I think 1 month after the DAO, we are basically ready for the next adventures.
Yeah, cool. Just one thing, because when we maintain this HTTP API branch concurrently to master, could we do something at the policy for people to merge master to HTTP API branch as well?
Yeah, just ping me. I will do it afterwards. I should basically merge it all the time, that it's always in sync with master. I just forgot it. And there was also, I was not so sure with if you have an open pull request or whatever, but I think at the moment, no, I think you added a pull request, or?
Yeah, I've added a pull request, and after I created it, I found out that there are conflicts, like tiny conflicts. Those are really easy to resolve.
Do you prefer that I merge before merging the pull request master, or?
As you like.
There are conflicts already now from the pull request, or?
No, there are no conflicts from my branch to PI branch, but there will be then conflicts.
Yeah. Okay. Then I merge it afterwards. Then I isolate the issues, and but yeah, I just ping me on Slack when I forget. I should do it more recently, more frequently.
Thank you.
Goody, anything else? I mean, a little bit update with some bug fixes or whatever. I mean, there was a bug with wallet restore. It only occurred after when you have a wallet, a real wallet basically, which has a certain age. That's why it usually was not discovered at testing. When you do with Rectus just a new wallet and restore it, it was working fine. The balance was correct. Also, the internal balance was there, and so it was not really a big risk. It was just not displayed in the UI because the address entry database file, which we need for maintaining the data structure for addresses which are used in the trade, that they are reserved basically. So when you're funding your offer, that this money is not used for sending Bitcoin to somebody or so. And this wallet database file was not updated correctly at restore, and then the balance showed 0 Bitcoin. Internally, it showed the full balance. When you made CMD E with this emergency wallet tool, you get basically the internal wallet balance from Bitcoin J, and there it was all correct. Just for the user, it was not displayed correctly, and there have been a few bug reports. And yeah, that's fixed now. We improved also a few other things in that area, that the restart is now automatically done and not optional. That was basically a bad idea to leave it to the user when he restart after he decided to make a restore. And I think there was something else. With peer-to-peer network things, there was some issues. So any developer, anybody who runs from source code, be sure to be on the latest master version, because they have some smaller issues which could lead to some problems, some bugs, but that should be fixed. It's still a little bit, Florian is running one seed node with his most recent development code and with some improvements, and there he gets much more data like all the other seed nodes and the normal node. And it's a little bit, we don't know yet why. It can be that in the worst case, the peer-to-peer network is really in a bad state, and 30% of the messages do not really arrive at each node. But I assume that's not the case. It's probably some bug at the end in his new version of the seed node, that he's not deleting data. So when an offer gets removed, that he's not receiving the removal of the offer, or some other complex issue, which I don't want to get into details here. But we are trying to get this area improved so that the peer-to-peer network is much more resilient again. It has worked pretty well until, as I think, when the offers were growing from 150 offers roughly to roughly 300 or 250, what we have now, over the last half year. And I think in this time, the network got flooded with much more refresh offer messages, and those are causing a lot of traffic in the network, and those issues that network messages don't arrive at all peers anymore as resilient as it was before. So that's one of the high prior issue at the moment, beside all the special topics that we're working on. Regarding Bitcoin J15, I think we talked last week a little bit, but just a quick overview. I talked with Oscar also about the roadmap, and it's not realistic that we will move over and integrate it, or have it integrated in the next 3 months at least, or minimum 3 to 6 months. It will take time to really battle test it, to integrate it in Bisq. It requires a lot of changes on the Bisq on our side, and it's likely missing some features like proper support for both legacy addresses and the new addresses, and maybe we need to change something in the trade protocol. Maybe, and that's maybe an important issue, as with the plan for the new trade protocol, we will have a sort of hard fork. So new users who have updated will not be backward compatible. They should be still able to read all their database files, so the local data has to be compatible, and it just can go on, but then they cannot trade with peers from who have not updated, and it's not decided yet the exact details if it will be really a different network. So we have a few version numbers where we can basically separate the network also, or separate only the trade protocol that you cannot trade with some users who have not updated, and so we want to keep it as minimum as possible. But the good thing is, because it's a kind of like a hard fork, we have the chance to clean up stuff. So some legacy code, which was only kept because of backward compatibility, can be maybe removed in this time. Maybe not. It depends on the concrete situation of this sort of hard fork. And especially with the trade protocol and everything what's related with the trade protocol, because that for sure will be a hard fork, we can change and clean up data there, and object like the offer is containing some data which will not be needed anymore, and then we create a new data object which doesn't contain this anymore. And when we need some new features, like maybe with SegWit, but probably it's too early, when it would make sense to use only BAC32 addresses in the trade protocol, because we are creating this this transactions and addresses from Bisq. We are basically free to choose this. I'm not aware if it brings big benefits or whatever. It can be even the opposite, that it's more recommended to use the legacy addresses. Anyway, it's something what we have to think a little bit about it. What makes sense? Maybe we should have somewhere a place where we are collecting all these topics which would make sense, maybe, or the bigger changes which usually cannot be done because of it would break backward compatibility, and we could schedule it up for this hard fork and then discuss what's worth to bring in, what's not worth it, and we also don't want to delay then the release of the trade protocol, because we need another 2 or 3 months for other bigger changes or so. But yeah, it's something what we should keep in mind, and everybody in his domain, when he thinks, yeah, I would like to change something, but I cannot because it would break backward compatibility. So there can be an opportunity in the next 3-4 months with releasing the new trade protocol where we can do this. Maybe not, but it's at least up to discussion. Regarding the plans for the new trade protocol, yeah, we are delayed. Also, I have not heard back from Craig. He has problem with his back, so he cannot work at the moment. And Nyman has updated, improved the specification, but I didn't have time to review it, and we'll have a discussion with him the next days. So once this specification is really more or less complete, then yeah, we can use maybe one session where everybody's reviewing it and we have a discussion about it. And yeah, and after that, now we have to figure out how we go on with development on this side. So when Craig is still not back to work, maybe I have to work on it probably, but we'll see. It's at least delayed at the moment, but it still has high priority, because it's very important to improve trading experiences. One important feature is that users can get in direct contact, and then the second step is to ask a mediator which doesn't hold the third key. So that improves a lot security concerns and decentralization concerns. And then arbitration is optional, and yeah, don't want to get into details, but I think it's a big improvement. And for sure, in my opinion, the second highest priority after the DAO. So we need to get this on track as well. Okay, anything else somebody want to add? We are already 1 hour, so I think good time to wrap up here. Yeah, by the way, Christoph is on holiday, that's why he didn't join. And yeah, from Florian, I didn't heard back. I fear he is sick. But yeah, I hope this time works well the next week again. So we stick with this time until nobody complains very bad. But I think Devin, the only time slot where he has time, so probably has to stick with this. And yeah, then I leave it a little bit open with the agenda for next week. If you have anything what you want to bring in, yeah, we can have it very flexible. yeah, we'll see what happened over the next week, and 1 or 2 days before the call, I will try to fix the agenda. Good. If nothing else, then let's wrap up here and see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.